All right. Well, again, thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. I'm Elizabeth. I work here at the Longview Public Library, and I have a lot of excitement about today's discussion. We've been waiting a long time for Dr. Smith to come. So this is a presentation through Humanities Washington. So I'm going to read to you the Humanities Washington welcome. So bear with me. Story time. So welcome to Civil Conversation in an Angry Age with Dr. David Smith. The presentation you are about to enjoy is part of Humanities Washington Speakers Bureau program. Humanities Washington is a nonprofit organization dedicated to sparking conversation and critical thinking, and it provides many other cultural programs to hundreds of thousands of people throughout Washington each year. I don't know if you've been to our other ones, but this is actually the third Humanities Washington presentation we've done this year. So, and we have 3 more for next year, so come back.
Oh, this is it.
Starts in March. I'll make sure you know. Thanks to support from the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Boeing Company, the Washington Secretary of State, and many private donors, Humanities Washington Speakers Bureau presenters visit all corners of the state. I would encourage you to visit their website, www.humanities.org, to find other events like this one. In today's discussion, Dr. Smith explores how we can have meaningful, respectful conversations on notoriously difficult topics like politics, religion, and morality, and provides participants with the tools needed to embark upon more thoughtful, fruitful discussions. David Smith holds a PhD in religious studies from Temple University. For the past decade, he has held roles as a lecturer, assistant professor, and associate professor of philosophy and religious studies. He currently teaches at the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at the University of Washington and frequently gives lectures in libraries, community centers, and retirement centers. The Longview Public Library is very thankful to both Humanities Washington and Dr. Smith for providing us with this opportunity to have this meaningful conversation in our own community. A note on civil discourse. The Speakers Bureau program is designed to generate an open and honest conversation on many topics, some of which may be controversial. We encourage differing perspectives and viewpoints, but we also ask that you treat this topic, the speaker, and each other with respect. Thank you very much. So let's welcome Dr. Smith and enjoy this great conversation.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon. Thank you for being here and allowing me to be here. If we can't have a civil conversation about civil conversation, we're in trouble, right? We are in trouble. This presentation will last approximately an hour and a quarter, and throughout the presentation I will stop periodically to have some Q&A and some discussion. We're not going to save it all for the very end. So you are welcome during those times to ask a question, make a comment. A few guidelines about that. If you would raise your hand and allow me to call on you the old-fashioned way, that would be helpful. And it's my job to repeat questions and comments, so give me the short version of them, okay? Now, this presentation is drawn on 3 fundamental sources. First of all, I've been teaching controversial topics for about 25 years. What I call the big 3, religion, ethics, and politics. That's what I do. So I work really, really hard in all of my lectures to be as fair and balanced and accurate as I can be. When things divide reasonable people in our culture, I try to present both sides of everything. And my mission as an educator is not to tell people what to believe about these things. It is to empower people to think for themselves about things that matter. And I also have a passion to help people build bridges toward those who disagree. So drawing on that professional experience, obviously drawing on personal experience, we have all had conversations with people in our lives about things that mattered, and they don't always agree with us, so we're drawing on that. I'll also be presenting some insights from Edward Langerak. He's a philosopher who has published on civility. So here we go, let's have fun with this and see if we can figure out why it's so easy to be uncivil and what we can do about it. So Humanities Washington likes to frame all their presentations with story, and I'm going to briefly tell you my story that is relevant to this topic. I'm not going to spend the whole hour and a quarter talking about it, but I'll be returning to it periodically. And if 2 or 3 of you have a story about a conversation you've had with someone in your life over something meaningful, where there was disagreement, and you'd like to share that story at the end, I usually save the last 10 minutes or so for that. A few stories of conversations. They could be conversations that went well, and you can help us understand, what you did right and what they did right, or conversations that didn't go well, and we can think about those together also. So I grew up in the world of fundamentalist Christianity. We were to the right of mainstream evangelicalism. And when I was younger, I was deeply committed to it. Deeply committed. Teenager, college student, 20-something. Over about a 15-year period, as a younger adult, I very gradually, for me, very rationally and very painfully changed my mind about many of the things that I had been taught growing up. I didn't reject all of it, but for me, the evidence against a fundamentalist worldview just kept mounting and mounting, and I found myself changing my mind. So one of the things that I had to do over the course of that 15-year journey, and even so to this day, is figure out what to say to whom. Because most of my friends, my family members were fundamentalist Christian, and I knew that they would not be sympathetic to my new views of things. And so I had to figure it out as I went along. You naturally want to share your beliefs, what you think are insights, your aha moments with the people in your life, but what if they aren't prepared to handle that? What if it's going to do more harm than good? So I had to figure that out. So I'll talk to you a little bit about that today. Now, we are calling this civil conversation in an angry age, and I'd like it to be, I'd like our society to be more civil, but I also want us to think about having more meaningful and productive conversations. Because it's possible to have a civil conversation with somebody that's not very meaningful, that doesn't really accomplish much. So we're calling it civil because that's where we really need to focus in our current political climate especially, but meaningful, productive, and useful conversations as well. Now we're going to start with some fun philosophy today. I am a philosopher after all, I have to give you some. So we're going to start with some very fun philosophy. Then we'll get a little bit psychological, and then hopefully by the time we're done we'll have some practical tips for inspiring civility. But before we talk about civility per se, I want us to think about why we human beings disagree so much about so many things. And it starts with this. It starts with all the different truth claims that we humans make. Think about it. We humans claim that things are true in every area of life. The big three: religion, ethics, politics, history, science, everything. We say things are true. And we live in a world now where there is fake news and where people say that truth is fake when they don't like it. So it can be very difficult for people, right? I have no one in mind, I'm just saying. So what is truth? Oh man, that's about as basic a question, right? I go with the pretty traditional definition of truth. Truth is that which corresponds to reality. Now, the truth is that which corresponds to reality, and reality is either past or present. It either happened or existed in the past, or it's happening or exists in the present. So when people say, don't we all have our own truth? I say, absolutely not. I don't even think that statement has meaning. Paraphrase it. If you can't paraphrase it, it might not mean anything. And I think it's actually dangerous. If we all have our own truth, then is anybody ever wrong? And does anyone ever lie? But we know as human beings that we are sometimes wrong, and people sometimes lie. So what does that imply about the concept of truth, right? If I'm wrong about something and I come to realize it, apparently what I believed didn't correspond to reality. If I'm lying to you, I'm saying something false and I know it's false, apparently that statement doesn't correspond to reality and I know it, right? So I would suggest we can all have our own beliefs about truth. And those beliefs may be right or wrong, but we can't have our own truth. Okay? Any objections so far? One objection?
A minimal
Okay,
objection.
go ahead.
And my thing is we all experience reality in many ways. I still agree with what you're saying. When we really know what reality is, okay, but we all experience it.
We experience it differently partially. But what amazes me is how often we experience it in very similar, if not the same way. How many of you perceive that we are all here at the library talking about civility right now? Okay, so it's not that bad. Now, having said that, let me qualify it. If you and I disagree about something, I say it's true, you say it's not, or vice versa. It is possible one of us is right and one is wrong. It is possible we're both wrong, and it's possible we both have a part of the truth, right? We often have a part of the truth. We see some of it. We may think we see it all, and we may not. So lots of possibilities. But if we don't get this concept straight in our heads, then I think we're just going to confuse ourselves more and more as time goes on. Well, 3 types of truth claims in philosophy. This is just one way to do it. We claim that things correspond to reality. I think the most basic truth claim is language. It is the words that we use, the words that we choose, the definitions that we provide or imply. Sometimes we human beings don't even agree on what words are appropriate in a certain context or what those words mean. So for my teaching, I'll give you 2 examples. One of my ethics courses, I lecture on the abortion debate. Is it pro-life and pro-choice, or is it anti-choice and pro-abortion, right? I mean, that feels different. Doesn't it feel different depending? So people call themselves pro-life and pro-choice. They usually call the other side pro-abortion or anti-choice. I try to use the language people choose for themselves when I can do it honestly. So in that case, I do it. How do I describe the entity in the womb? Is it a fetus or an unborn child? Those sound very different, do they not? Okay, so language is powerful, and we don't always agree on the right language, and even on the definitions. Another lecture I give is called Spirituality with and Without Religion. Try to define spirituality in a way that everyone in this room will agree to. That word, that concept has been evolving, and people do mean different things by it. So whether it's the words we choose or how we use them or what, every word is a symbol of something. Okay, and we don't always agree on what the symbol represents. So it starts with language. All right, the next type of truth claim we make and don't always agree with, these are empirical truth claims. We all believe a lot about the world based on the 5 senses. And I'm going to suggest there are 3 levels here. First of all, I believe things based on my own direct experience of the world. So do you. What you've seen, what you've heard, etc. But if that's all you and I knew about the world is what we had experienced directly, our knowledge would be pretty small, our body of knowledge, pretty small. But thankfully, I have all of your experiences. What have you seen? What have you heard? Where have you been? What have you done? And that helps my knowledge grow. But when you listen to the experiences of other people, then you have to ask some questions, right? Is this reliable? And are they telling me the truth? And so you have to start thinking about it. There's a 3rd level of empirical truth claim. And that's the truth claims that the scientists make, those who are trained in empirical methods. Can you think of anything the scientists are saying today that not everybody believes? Help me out here, just in case there's something. All right, climate change. We're not here to debate any of these hot topics, thankfully. We're just here to talk about how to talk about them. But I want to use climate change very quickly because I think it's useful. Whatever your personal view is, it doesn't matter. What we're trying to do for the next couple minutes is figure out why. On the one hand, the scientists, there is a strong consensus within science that climate change is real, that we have contributed to it and we need to do something about it. Regardless of your personal view, tell me why not everyone believes that. Just let me hear. I need to see some hands. Yes?
They may be afraid.
Afraid of what?
The reality of it.
Okay, afraid of the reality, afraid of what it might mean for them.
They may be making big bucks
Okay, it might get in the way of someone's finances or economics.
We're going to have a cold freeze come out of the north. How can you believe in all the science? That's another perspective. It's going to happen next week in
Oh, you mean it's actually, that's the weather prediction. Yes. He's saying there is going to be colder than usual weather in the east, and for those who don't immerse themselves in the evidence, you know, if you just, let's kick that up a notch, if you just live through the coldest winter you can remember, and then people tell you that you should be worrying about global warming, it just there's a disconnect there. And I want to suggest something here, that science, modern science, and I mean roughly the past 400 years, the scientists have been describing the world in ways that don't seem compatible with our everyday experience of it this entire time. Even something as simple as, you know, the movement of the sun on a sunny day. Don't you see it rise in the east, move across the sky, and set in the west? But the scientists say, we're moving, it's not moving. Come on now, I see it moving with my own eyes. You see what I'm saying? And so with climate change or anything, this is one of the things that started messing with the philosophers 400 years ago. The scientists were starting to describe the world in ways that seemed odd, and the philosophers, early modern philosophers, started questioning all sorts of things. They were wondering, well, if we're wrong about that, what else are we wrong about? So there are different reasons why people may not agree. One more in the back.
Yes, you said climate change.
Yeah.
Climate change is real. Climate has always been changing. And then you go back to the language you used, and you mentioned global warming, which could be a completely separate issue from climate change because climate change is colder or hotter. So it goes back to the language there.
Okay, the language there matters, but the warming, according to the scientists, the warming we're experiencing is a part of the climate change we're experiencing that they're worried about.
And they said in the 70s there was going to be an ice age.
Okay, and that's my final point. That's a perfect segue. Has the consensus in science ever been wrong before? Yes. Yes. So not everybody who disagrees with climate change is just refusing to look at the evidence. This is tough. You know, how do we know it's not wrong now? And the only way I can answer that question is to say they put the evidences out there. Thankfully, one of the good things about the internet, right, is that there are reliable, but make sure you find reliable. There are reliable sites that put the evidence out there, and you can weigh it for yourselves. But it turns out to be a little more complicated than we think. But what are we doing here? We're trying to figure out why we humans disagree so much. And there are different reasons for people questioning that. All right, finally, where I spend most of my professional life, what we call normative or value-based truth claims. This is right, this is wrong. It's ethics. Aesthetics. What is art and what is good art? Religion. I teach several religion courses, all academically. I really do have a passion to educate people in world religions because I think religious illiteracy is dangerous, regardless of your personal beliefs. But I can't think of anything we humans, I mean globally, historically, anything that we've disagreed about more. It's amazing. I'm amazed at all the different, I teach 7 different world religions, and I'm amazed at the truth claims that they all make. They're willing to tell us all sorts of things about God and revelation and miracles in the afterlife and all of that. It's pretty amazing. Politics. We certainly disagree about what is right and wrong, true and false, best, good, better, best. Economics, and so on. Now, I think we can say that we disagree about normative truth claims so much because they involve so much judgment, personal judgment. There's a lot of subjectivity. It doesn't mean it's purely that way. I think you can present evidences for different views. You can make rational arguments for different perspectives. But in the end, you take your logical steps and then you hit the wall and you have to draw a conclusion, and it requires some judgment. And so that's going to produce. So, my goodness, we disagree about all sorts of things. And when there's potential for disagreement, there is the possibility of incivility, which can become hatred. And if we don't deal with that, it can become violence. So we want to stop it early on. All right.
About daylight savings.
Pardon?
I'm cranky about daylight savings.
You're cranky about daylight savings. Not sure I can help you with it. All right. What is civility? Well, I'm about to make a semantics truth claim here. We'll see how it goes, right? I'm going to give you two. It's pretty simple. The definitions are out there, not that complicated. Oxford Dictionary defines it as formal politeness and courtesy in behavior or speech. Edward Langerack, a philosopher who's written about this and whose work I'm drawing on in part, defines it as treating others with appropriate courtesy and respect. I actually prefer Langerack's definition because of two words. I like the word respect. I think it's a little more substantial than just politeness and courtesy. I think there's something about true respect that recognizes the full humanity of the other person even when we disagree. And I like his word appropriate because that tells me what might be uncivil to one person may not be to another. There's some wiggle room. There's room for disagreement about what kinds of discourse are appropriate. Depends on your personality in part. I mean, some people are just a lot more sensitive than others. Maybe family dynamics, and certainly culture influences what we consider acceptable forms of discourse. But at some point, I think most of us would recognize incivility if we happen to hear it. Not that we are, but in case we ever do. And the two things that, the two signs to me that we're being uncivil is if we're having a disagreement and we're supposed to be talking about our beliefs and critiquing each other's ideas, but one of us insults the other person's intelligence or character. Those are my two kind of red flags. Now, if another person's intelligence or character is the issue at hand, then at some point we have to, I don't know why you guys keep laughing. I mean, if that is the issue, then we have to learn how to talk about that in a civil manner. But when we're supposed to be focusing on ideas or beliefs and we end up insulting, again, it's usually intelligence or character, isn't it? Then I think we've kind of gotten off the straight and narrow way. So I like the word appropriate. It gives us some flexibility. Now, what I would like to do, any disagreements with my semantics truth claim there? Is that sort of what you had in mind when you came today and wanted to hear something about civility? I think respect is a good synonym, true respect. Okay. All right, now I want to spend most of our time here trying to figure out why we are uncivil sometimes and then what we can do about it. So let's diagnose the problem and then let's treat it. Okay, these are my thoughts. This is my list. I think for those of us who struggle, when we struggle with incivility, there are things going on below the surface that we're not aware of. That if we can identify, if we can think about them, we can feel more empowered to be civil. So let's talk about it. Let me work through my list, and then I will be happy to get your responses to what I have up here, or to what is not up here if you think we should add something. All right, my thoughts over the years about incivility. When we're uncivil, sometimes we fail, I think, to recognize our own limitations. We act like we know it all, right? We are so convinced. So I want to reflect on this for a little bit. Failure to recognize my own limitations. It doesn't matter how smart you are, how educated you are, how experienced you are. None of us knows everything. And so I have a couple of fun philosophical questions I want to ask you about this. My first fun philosophical question is this. Is it safe for me to assume that everybody in this room is wrong about something right now? I mean, that's pretty safe. I went on a limb, but that thing's pretty thick. Because we've all been wrong before. We've come to realize we were wrong. We were factually wrong about this, that, or the other. So we're probably wrong about something now. The problem is we don't know what it is. Or we change our minds, I hope. But we're all wrong about something. We don't know what it is. We forget this. Now here's my second fun philosophical question, and I think it's a profound one. And this is just for reflection. Which do you value more, truth or your own beliefs? Because if we're all wrong about something, those two things are not identical, right? So if I value truth more than my own beliefs, I think it should inspire me to listen to you more, in case I'm wrong, or in case you have some aspect of the truth I don't have, right? On anything at all. So, commitment to truth, and that means sometimes we're willing to question our beliefs, we're willing to do some research, we're willing to listen to people who disagree. All right, well, I think that's one problem we have. Bias is another problem or challenge. If you look up bias in the dictionary, it'll use the word prejudiced for or against something or somebody, and that's good. I think if we go a little bit deeper, I think there's something else going on here that I'll bet you that your beliefs about important things, you have them, and I'll bet you like them, don't you? You like your beliefs. I like my beliefs. Our conclusions about all the different areas of life, all the truth claims, they help us make sense out of this crazy world we live in. And they guide us through it, right? Once in a while, somebody will say, I hope I'm wrong, but that's the exception. Normally, we hope we are not wrong. It feels really good to be right. But we have to be on guard against that. We're also biased. All my psychologists who are here tonight can testify. We have confirmation bias. We love evidence that confirms our beliefs. And we're willing to grab it and put it on display. And the counter evidences, the things that seem to undermine our beliefs, we are really good at marginalizing all that, right? All right, here's a powerful one. I like to talk about identity and beliefs. For many of our cherished beliefs, we don't say or merely say that we believe them. We say that we are those things. Give you an example, one example from each of the big three. Politics. If you're committed to one of the parties, you probably, think about the language you use. You probably don't say, yes, I vote Republican consistently, or I vote Democratic consistently. What do you say? I am a Republican, or I am a Democrat. It's who you are. Religion. I believe in Christian teachings. I believe in Buddhist teachings. I believe in naturalism. No. I am a Christian. I am a Buddhist. I am an atheist. I am whatever. Ethics. Some ethical issues. Not all of them, but abortion. If you have a firm view, you probably don't say, I believe in the pro-choice view or I believe in the pro-life view. I am pro-choice. I am pro-life. What am I making out of this? Well, I'm not suggesting that we stop saying all that. If I made that suggestion, no one would pay attention, so I'm not going to do it. And I understand it because these beliefs matter so much to us. I'm here to suggest there's a danger in it, though, that we need to be aware of. Because if I am my beliefs, and you disagree with my beliefs, which you have the right to do, it feels like an attack on me. But it's not. We should be able to allow people to disagree with our beliefs, to critique them, without feeling like it is an attack on us. And so I think somehow we have to maybe compartmentalize that identity when people disagree so that we can get beyond that and actually listen to what they have to say about those beliefs. All right. Now, we could ask a little different question about this, more philosophical question. To what extent am I my beliefs? So if I think about this for myself, if you could go back in time 30 years and talk to me, and when I was still a committed fundamentalist Christian, in some ways I would be a different person. I mean, I'm different now in my attitudes toward others. On the other hand, I still have the same DNA. I'm sure I look identical to what I looked like 30 years ago. Same memories. So it's kind of a weird thing, isn't it? I sort of am my beliefs, but I can't just be my beliefs thoroughly because, well, what if I need to change a belief? Will that change me as a person? Maybe, and maybe don't we all need personal growth? If we all need personal growth, that might involve changing some beliefs. So there is a connection there, but we have to be careful. All right, well, I might have been uncivil, but he started it. And we've noticed in some of our public discourse, unfortunately, incivility can be contagious. Someone's condescending to you, you just might want to give it back to them. And if they are, you have to think, do I want to do that or do I want to stay above it? And that's a decision each of us has to make. But the incivility of others can have a negative effect. I think the good news is civility is also contagious. And we can be that change we want to see in the world. All right, emotion. Often conversations that go off track because of emotion. So let's philosophize about emotion. Why do we have so much emotion attached to beliefs? I went camping and hiking with my best friend on the planet 2.5 years ago. He doesn't live around here. We went to school together a long time ago and used to hike and camp a lot. So he doesn't live anywhere near here, but he shows up every few years and we try to do it. 2.5 years ago, we got a primitive cabin up near Mount Baker, hiked. But in the cabin that week, we had 2 different conversations, one about a politician, one about a moral issue that had impacted one of us personally. And unfortunately, neither conversation went very well. Now, it wasn't terrible. We patched it up, mostly. But it just wasn't what it should have been because we allowed emotion to get in the way. And as we're driving back to civilization, he looks at me in the car and says, "We're going to be quiet the whole way?" I said, "No, we'll get past it." But I started analyzing this connection between emotion and beliefs more intentionally. And obviously, there's the first answer is, well, these things matter to us. But I still want to say, so what? Why do we get emotional? And I think at a subconscious level, we all know that beliefs matter and people's ideas change the world. And we worry that if that person's belief became the dominant view, we might not want to live in that world. Or maybe that view is the dominant view and it's not good for people like us or someone like us, or others. So ideas matter. Ideas create the world. Think about modern ideas like human rights and democracy, mostly modern. Think about how those are ideas, that each individual human rights, I lecture on human rights a lot, I love human rights theory and application. But the idea that each individual human has worth and therefore is entitled to respectful treatment seems like such a simple thing, but that is mostly a modern idea. Or that government shouldn't be top down, it shouldn't be kings and queens and emperors and other dictators, it should be bottom up, of, by, and for the people. Think about how those ideas are changing the world. So yeah, if I disagree with someone because of their beliefs and I'm feeling some emotion, I might really worry that their beliefs might create a world that I don't want to live in. All right, 2 more things and then I'll get your your take on this. Affirmation. Affirmation has different forms, I think. Back to my story with religion, trying to figure out what to say to whom in my life, family and friends, who were still in the world of fundamentalist religion and I wasn't. You want to be able to share, and you want people to affirm. The first thing I would love for people to say back to me is, I agree with you, that's nice. But if they can't do that, I at least want them to say, I see where you're coming from, it's okay that you've changed your mind, I disagree with you, but I respect you and I kind of see where you're coming from. But not everybody can do even that. In the world of fundamentalist religion, it is not okay to change your mind. And I had to come to terms with this, the emotional side of it, that if someone was not mentally, spiritually, intellectually, emotionally capable of telling me it's okay, I shouldn't expect it. It's just going to wreak havoc if I push it and demand it, right? I used to teach in Indiana, and there was a psychology professor back there who said, David, if the people in your life won't affirm you, then find new people. Now, you can't find new family, but you can find new friends, and I had to make some new connections along the way who will tell you you're not crazy, right? But we have to be careful. We can't always get from others what we want. Well, finally, kind of coming full circle, just with a little different nuance here, closed-mindedness. It's related to a failure, I think, to recognize my limitations. But I want to talk more specifically about convictions and open-mindedness. It may be that most, if not all of you, have some convictions about things. A conviction is a belief you hold concerning which you are deeply convinced. We don't want to be wishy-washy, do we? We want to have some convictions. Religion, ethics, politics, science, history, everything else. But we also value open-mindedness, right? That's an intellectual virtue that I'm actually willing to question and my belief and listen to you and research and grow. But my question is, can I have a conviction about something and be open-minded on that same issue at the same time? Is it easy? No. Right, I think you're right. I think it is not a contradiction, we'll start there, to say that I'm deeply convinced. But if you can make a compelling case for a different view, I'll listen. But it's not easy. That's the challenge. So I'm not saying don't have convictions, but kind of connected to the notion that we're wrong about something and just don't know what it is. All right, this is my diagnosis. What do you think of what you see here, or would you suggest something that's not here? Again, I'd love to see hands, and I'd like to hear from as many people as possible. So a few of you who haven't talked yet, what do you think of what you see here or what you don't see? Yes?
I think sometimes you can be convinced in a group of a certain idea, sort of mob mentality, and then on a one-to-one, when you might be really have to pick harder of the situation, and your mind can be more changed.
She's saying sometimes we get into groupthink. We get the people around us are so convinced that we can sort of start going along with it, but then when we're alone, we may start questioning that. How would you connect that to, do you connect that in your mind to incivility?
It could lead to incivility.
It could eventually. Yeah, one of the things that, I do history of religion and philosophy of religion because those are my degrees, but I sometimes draw on the psychologists and other social scientists who talk about religion. Psychology of religion fascinates me, but they've written, and they're going to write a bunch more, I think, as time goes on, because the social sciences are relatively young disciplines. But they talk about the pressure that we humans put on each other to believe things. And it's an interesting thing. Beliefs do a lot of things for us socially. First of all, they bind us together, right? You get around people who share your beliefs about things that matter, and you're bonded to them. At the same time, it separates you from people who disagree. But one of the dangers of the group is the putting pressure, right? And I know this happens in all sorts of areas. It certainly happens in fundamentalist forms of religion. There's so much pressure to believe. Okay, other thoughts about what is causing us some challenge here?
This may be a bullet that could be separate, or maybe it's a bullet, or maybe it's a subset of all of them. Communication requires at least two people to engage, and that's refusal to listen, people not listening, or declining to listen. And there are those, I'm guilty of it myself, who are always on transmit and seldom on receive.
All right, the gentleman is suggesting one of our problems here is we don't listen enough. I'm going to come back to that on the next slide as a part of the cure for all this, to listen more. So we will talk about that. Yes, behind him. Yes, sir.
Just the third identity. In this society, we're identified by what we do. Who are you? So-and-so, I'm a barber, I'm this. And that's our identity, but we fail to recognize our own common humanness, human beingness.
Yeah. He says another aspect of identity is, in our culture, is what we do for work, and we're so connected to that we forget the humanity of people who maybe do different things. All right, two of you just mentioned 2 of the 4 points on my next slide. So hang on to that one too. We are coming back to it. Oh, I think she was next. Oh.
I am reminded of the 3 umpires got rained out, and so they ended up at a philosopher convention. They're sitting in the bar talking about it, and the first umpire, you know, I'm a realist. If it's a strike, I call it a strike, and if it's a ball, I call it a ball. The other guy said, well, I'm an impressionist. If it looks like a strike, I call it. If it looks like a ball, I call it a ball. And the third umpire says, well, I'm an existentialist. He says, it ain't a ball or it ain't a strike until I call it. I think I am an umpire.
All right. Thank you for sharing, and I don't even think I have to repeat that. You did a good job. Oh, there was someone in the back. Yes, real loud. Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to state that, like, you said sometimes it feels like for identity, it feels like an attack on us because I am this or that.
Yes.
But sometimes it feels like we should disagree because I'm this and they're that, and because of that, we should disagree, right? Maybe it shouldn't be civil, is one of the problems with identity.
If I'm hearing you correctly, I think you're suggesting one of the problems with identity is if someone identifies as something different, something that matters, I almost feel obligated to disagree. And that's a problem. Really good. Yeah, that's the third of my 4 points on the next slide. Did you guys see my PowerPoint slide? All right, let's do one more and then we'll move to it. Go right ahead.
Is it possibly biochemical? And are we, as a predator, tribal species, wired to say us and learning or feeling or somewhere beyond what we know how to do? Let's get rid of them so that us.
All right, that was profound. I'll do my best with it. She says, is it biochemical? Is it built into our, I think you're saying this, is it built into our DNA from the need to survive, to be a part of a tribe, and to maybe even eliminate the other? I don't doubt that. I mean, I don't doubt that there is a biological side to virtually everything. And, you know, the timeless debate in the social sciences now is how much is nature, how much is nurture, how much is, the way I like to say it is, how much is genetic and how much is experiential, because it goes beyond our nurture. I think every one of us is a combination of our genetics and our total life story. So I don't doubt that. Anybody who hasn't spoken yet? Right here.
Could it be, going from what you said, the thing is, though, is if you research history and primitive societies, a great many of them, and these were very tribal, they had very strong rules on how conflict was handled, and very strong rules of civility and honor. So I don't know if we could blame historical and primitive DNA. I am wondering, well, for lack of a better philosophy, to a great extent, becomes of etiquette. Meaning you can say whatever you want, but please try to say it politely, which is very simplistic, and I think probably the core of what you're saying.
Okay, two good points. She doesn't want to blame the tribal history too much because she's saying in her understanding of it, there were rules for resolving conflict, so let's don't put too much blame there. And her other comment was we've lost a sense of etiquette. Yeah, we've lost a sense of discretion and appropriateness, and we need to do better. We're a little too casual, aren't we? All right. Now, let's see what we can do about this. I call this ingredients in the recipe of civility. I use the metaphor of a recipe periodically when I'm describing something complicated or something with different aspects to it. We want to avoid two logical fallacies that have great practical ramifications. We don't want to oversimplify anything, and we don't want to overcomplicate anything. Those are the two. That's a challenge. We always want to split the difference. So ingredients in the recipe. I don't want to oversimplify what we need to do. I want to have kind of what I think are the basics. I've had people suggest more than what you're about to see here, and some good suggestions, trying to keep it manageable, and so we can try to remember some of this. I have 4 ingredients that I've thought about. I'm drawing on Langerak's work partially. I've revised it. These are my 4 ingredients, 4 things about which I have a passion. Well, virtue. I think civility starts with character. Virtue theory or character development is an approach to ethics that is unique. There are lots of moral theories out there that try to tell us what makes any particular action right or wrong. But the moral theory known as virtue theory is unique because it focuses on the characteristics of noble people. They connect character to behavior, and behavior matters, but the focus isn't on whether an action is right or wrong. The focus is on what are those positive characteristics of humanity or human nature. Can we identify them? Can we develop them? The opposites are the vices, those things that drag us down morally, those characteristics that drag us down. So virtue theory, this is my latest course actually, the latest course I developed. I call it character development. And there are many virtues, and I draw on both ancient and contemporary sources. In the ancient world, Aristotle in ancient Greece was, I think, probably the first major Western virtue theorist. Plato before him had things to say about character, but Aristotle focused on it. He created a long list of virtues. He made his case for what they were. You may have heard of the golden mean of Aristotle. He thought virtues were often in the middle between extreme emotions or actions. These are 3 of them: humility, courage, self-control. In Eastern culture, the Buddha in ancient India was a virtue theorist, and in China, Confucius was a virtue theorist. They both had a lot to say about these characteristics of noble people. And one of the, I think, strengths of virtue theory, for all of our differences as human beings, the virtues are fairly universal. They don't belong to any one culture. If you ask Aristotle, give me a list of virtues, you ask Jesus, give me a list of virtues, ask the Buddha, Confucius, their lists are going to be very similar. Most cultures admire people who are humble, self-controlled, courageous, and many others. Generosity, compassion, those things show up in a lot of cultures. So I think it starts here, and I picked these 3. I actually want to add one to my version of this PowerPoint. Humility is kind of the antidote for thinking I know it all, right? For failure to recognize my own limitations, well, maybe I need to humble myself and realize there is far more. If you think about everything, if we could combine everything that everybody in this room knows and compare it to what I know, you'd blow me out of the water. What we don't know about reality far exceeds, I think, what any one of us knows about it. So humility, self-control for that emotion. I mean, emotion is a wonderful thing. I am a holistic person, a holistic philosopher. I believe in logic and reason. I believe reason is necessary but not sufficient. I believe in all of our human nature. And emotion matters. Wouldn't life be boring with no emotion? You couldn't feel anything. It'd be boring. So for me, emotion's like a fire. I love a fire in a fireplace. It's beautiful, it's warm, it makes you happy, but we all know the danger of fire when it's out of control. A wildfire is destructive. Emotion makes life worth living, but out of control it's destructive, and we need to develop that virtue of self-control. Courage is for those of us who may be a little shy, and we may be in personal or professional relationship with somebody who's very dominant, maybe even a bully. And if you're going to speak your view, you're going to speak your mind, your convictions, it might take some courage. It's hard to talk to a dominant person. It's hard to talk to a bully. The other virtue that I would like to add here comes from two stories I've heard from audience members giving this, stories at the end of conversations. And two people in my audiences this year have told stories of engaging with someone who was very uncivil at the beginning of a conversation with them, but they decided to turn the other cheek for a while and exercise the virtue of forbearance, where you're willing to tolerate some incivility for a while for a cause, for a goal that you want to reach. And the two stories that were told were success stories. Both of these people, they had the right to return an eye for an eye, but they decided to turn the other cheek. And they engaged these people and said, why do you believe that? Why do you think that about me or my religion or my politics? And they were able to explain and clarify and get rid of some misunderstanding. And those two stories, by the time those conversations were done, the people who were uncivil, they apologized. They said, I was wrong. And in one case, they became friends even. So courage, self-control, humility, and forbearance. Now, turning the other cheek, my view of this is you get to decide how long to turn the other cheek and when to draw a line and say, no more, I'm not going to take any more abuse. But a little bit of that is noble. All right, the last thing I'll say about this is, for the most part, I think virtue theory is a lifelong pursuit. We can't just turn it on like a light switch when we need it. It's about personal growth forever, isn't it? Okay. All right, one of you mentioned this in a little different form, what I call, and I just have one word for each of these to help us remember, what I call commonality, or our common humanity. I'm keeping an eye on the clock. I could talk about this a lot because I have a passion for it. And I think in my discipline of philosophy, there is a tendency, because we get under the surface of things, we see more similarity than people wearing different academic glasses. For example, we can disagree about an important issue, but under the surface, there can be a shared value that we're applying in very different ways. So we have a common humanity, and one of my concerns in our postmodern world is that we're focusing so much on difference and diversity, which is generally good, but if that's all we talk about, we forget that underneath, we're all human beings, and it starts with the same needs. I mean, let's start with biology. We all need food, and we need water and shelter and clothing. Socially, we need friendship. We need respect. We need love. Right? We need some opportunity. So we have some very basic needs that we share. And we do have some common values, as I said. It's not like virtue theory. Sometimes when I'm reading the Buddha, I have to remind myself, this isn't Jesus, this is Siddhartha, because they're so similar when it comes to how you respond to people who mistreat you, for example. In other ways, they are very different, right? Now, in particular, I want to talk about our common humanity as it pertains to belief formation. I think this is really helpful. I hope that you will see it as such. So you've had someone in your life, maybe you have someone in your life who disagrees with you about something important, or a lot of things that matter. And you surely have had the following thought: how in the world can they believe that? That's ridiculous. All right, let's analyze it. How can they? But we're going to change it I want you to think about yourself and all your beliefs. How can you believe that stuff? Now I'll change it again. Why do you believe whatever it is you believe about religion, ethics? I say ethics. I lecture on all the controversies. Abortion, death penalty, gun rights and gun control, affirmative action, gay marriage, media ethics, all of that stuff. So whatever you believe about religion, ethics, politics, how did you come to those beliefs? If you wonder how can that person believe, well, let's figure out how any of us comes to believe anything. I think we have this assumption sometimes when we get really frustrated with each other, that person's just being stubborn, they're just choosing to believe that nonsense. I don't think that's quite right. So let's talk for a minute about this mysterious thing called free will. Free will, as it pertains to behavior, is one thing, and as it pertains to belief is something else. So whatever your view of free will, there are different views out there, but if we believe some aspect of the freedom of the will, safe to assume, again, that everyone in here came to the lecture today because you freely chose to. You thought about it, maybe you thought about what you might be doing otherwise, and you made a choice. You exercised your will to come here today. That is not how you came to your beliefs about religion, ethics, politics, science, or anything else. I'm going to suggest to you, you don't choose your beliefs. All of our beliefs form within us naturally as we live our lives and are exposed to all sorts of influences. And those influences create belief. Some of our beliefs are based on reason. They're based on evidence. Maybe you're an expert at something. You've researched it, and you've become convinced that things are true. Other things we all believe, we grew up that way. We were taught. We've all probably questioned some of what we were taught. I questioned a bunch of it. But we all probably believe something that we were taught growing up. It's just been with us forever. We haven't encountered a good reason to question it. It works for us. It helps us live our lives. We probably believe some things out of emotion. Some of our beliefs are there probably to comfort us and give us a sense of security. We may believe a few things because other people whom we respect believe those things, and it sort of rubbed off on us. But you didn't sit around your living room one day saying, I think I'm just going to choose to believe that there's a God, or I'm going to choose to believe that the Democrats are better than the Republicans, or vice versa. I'm just going to choose to believe that gay marriage is right or sinful. You didn't do that. Beliefs emerge like dandelions in May. Now, I'll give you a silly example if you're still not convinced. If I said right now, and I'm not, but if I said to you, I want you to freely choose to stand up, you could all do it. But if I said, I want you to freely choose to sincerely believe that Oregon is north of here. Come on, just use your free will, choose it. You can't. You can choose to act. You can't choose to believe, with rare exception, like self-deception or being in denial, and that's not the kind of thing you want to do very often, right? You can't. If I wanted you to sincerely believe that Oregon was north of here, I'd have to make a really compelling case. My point is this: how can that person believe that nonsense? Well, if I had their genetics, whatever that role plays, and if I had lived their life, if I had had all their experiences, I would probably believe that nonsense too. That should create some empathy, some respect. Even if I think, oh no, you've drawn wrong conclusions about things, but the process by which they came to those beliefs, same as mine. Now, the influences come in different proportions. Maybe some of us really are more rational than others. Some of us maybe do pay attention to evidence more. Some people are more rational than others are less, but we're all subject to some rationality, some emotion, our upbringing, and all of that. So that should, I hope you find that useful. All right, a couple more and then I'll see what you have to say. Intentionality. This may not apply to everybody. Some of you may be so naturally nice all the time, you don't understand why the rest of us struggle. You came today to try to figure us out. And many of us have to do this on purpose. Now, you get credit for doing 2 of the 3 right here. Right now, you get credit. Intentionality, focusing on civility before, during, and after. You're all doing it before your next conversation right now. Good job. And you're doing it after your last one because you're here. The challenge is to do it during, right? During. And sometimes we can prepare. If I know I have to talk to somebody next week who disagrees with me and I'm going to feel the heat rising, I can prepare. Sometimes these things just take us by surprise, but being intentional about it. Finally, one of you mentioned the need to listen. So communication is my single word here to capture it, but following the principles of good communication, which means in any conversation I get to speak and I get to listen. For many of us, as the gentleman suggested earlier, it's true for many of us, the speaking part is easier than the listening part. And when we listen, we're not really listening. We're thinking about what we're going to say in response because we can't wait. Can't wait to share our wisdom. For some of us, again, if you're shy and you're interacting with a dominant person, it might be harder for you to speak than to listen. You might have to focus on that part. But we all get to speak and listen, or it's not a conversation, right? On the listening thing, I'm so anxious to respond to what you've said. I can't wait. And so what I end up doing sometimes is interrupting you. And I've been analyzing interruptions more intentionally for about a year. So let's do philosophy of interruptions. I've been asking, and I don't know what the trigger was. I've just noticed over the past year or so, more than I ever had before, how often we humans interrupt each other and how often I do it. I'm catching myself more. So I think, well, when is it okay to interrupt and when is it not? So what a few of you suggest when it's okay to interrupt somebody. Let me see some hands. New people, yes. I'm sorry, right here.
When someone is dominating the conversation, you can't get a word in, you interrupt them.
Someone's dominating. They've been talking for 10 minutes and it was your turn 5 minutes ago. All right. Another scenario where it would be appropriate in your opinion? Is there one back here?
Safety.
Safety. Yeah, if you see a danger coming, you have to interrupt. Yes, right here.
My sister and I and our sibs had a parent who especially valued critical thinking and being incisive and concise. So sometimes at the dinner table, he would deliberately say something that he knew could or probably should elicit a response. And he would kind of have a twinkle in his eye, but he would deliberately set us up to contradict him.
Okay, there's someone in the family that was trying to stir it up at dinner. Was there interruption involved?
Oh, yes.
Would he interrupt people just to try to get you to think more? Oh. Do you think that's an example of appropriate interruption?
Well, one of my sibs carries it into inappropriate.
One of the siblings doesn't have the same skill. Any other scenarios? Yes?
Well, as seniors, as I get older, I forget.
Yes.
When I hear a conversation, I have to say what I'm thinking now or it's gone 2 seconds.
Yep, I've heard that. She's saying, as I'm getting older, if I don't interrupt you now, I might forget what I was going to say. Yes?
Especially in a meeting, you know, where you want to get it done in a certain period of time, and somebody is just going off on tangents and going off side tracks, so you have to bring it back.
In a meeting, we have a time limit. We got to wrap it up. The other scenario I think is appropriate is, one more.
When they're already repeating themselves or you already agree with what they're saying.
When they're mansplaining.
I didn't really hear that.
When they're he said if someone's repeating themselves a lot and you just like, I got that. One other scenario is sometimes I think people will receive an interruption if they say something and you have a thought that is so directly relevant, if you could just sneak it in right there, it would be more useful than if you wait. So all of these are good, but I think, having said all that, I think we interrupt each other too much. We're in such a hurry. Our society is in such a hurry. I tend to be, a cable news network junkie. I'm just amazed at how fast Everybody talks. People tell me I talk too fast, but I'm in slow motion compared to people on CNN and MSNBC, especially when they're interviewing people, right? I've got 10 seconds left. What's your worldview? It's crazy, and I think we're all in too big a hurry. If we could just slow it down a little bit. Disagreeing and agreeing, affirming. I have also noticed that people of wisdom in the political sphere and just in daily life, they're disagreeing with somebody on all sorts of things. If we can just find one thing to agree with. I mean, the gentleman suggested earlier, sometimes if people identify as something else, we feel like we have to disagree all the time. No, let's find something to agree to. If I listen to you long enough, I'm gonna hear something that I can agree to and affirm, and if I say it, I think that goes a long way toward helping the tension to evaporate. And we can tolerate our disagreements a lot more if we just agree a little bit. Agree once in a while. A few years ago, I heard somebody, it just happened to be, CNN in presidential elections, you got the 4 Republicans over here and the 4 Democrats over here, and they're all disagreeing. But one of the news anchors asked it just happened to be a Democrat, he asked him, he said, when somebody on the other side has a good idea, how do you respond? He got a big old smile on his face. He said, well, I just wait a while because eventually somebody on my side will have the same idea. Yeah. But yeah, let's agree. We don't have to disagree with everything the other side says, whatever that is. So this is my recipe. Would any of you like to respond to what you see, or would you like to add something? All the way in the back.
Hi. I would like to first acknowledge that I don't agree with anything that you say.
Okay.
And I respectfully do that, honestly, from a heart-centered space.
Right.
So my message and my suggestion, I came here, I'm one of those people who are very kind and generous and came to see what was being said and discussed because it's my passion as well. So what I'm hearing and what I understand in my own travels and my own walking and what I am trying to teach going forward is that we need to be in I would suggest that we need to come from a heart-centered space rather than a logical thinking space, because that's where we're stuck, is my opinion on this.
All right.
That we come and we think about these things and we talk about it, and we go home and we think about it and we talk about it, and we go to work and we think about it and we talk about it.
So she is, if you couldn't hear, she's suggesting less head, more heart. You also said you didn't agree with anything I've said tonight. That's the first time anybody's ever said that.
Let me tell you where I come from. I'm a retired clinical social worker.
Yeah.
My history of work has been working with populations who are traumatized.
Yeah.
So early childhood sex abuse, child and welfare services, domestic violence, substance abuse. These are the populations I've worked with. So I'm very familiar with discourse and people subjectifying and looking at populations that are at risk. And I would suggest that we are in a crisis right now and there's lots of populations at risk, and that we need to get in our heart space. I would suggest as human beings that is our point, that we come together to understand how we have civil discourse.
Okay.
Because I would suggest that if we connect to our
All right. I appreciate all that, and the way I can connect it to this is we could certainly add a couple virtues that I think you're implying, compassion and empathy. Those are absolutely on the list of virtues that a lot of people embrace, so thank you for that. All right, I'm looking at the clock. I said I have a conclusion, but I don't necessarily need to go there. I would love to hear from 2 or 3 of you about conversations you've had. Again, you got to give us the short version of the story. If you need to tell the story anonymously to protect people's privacy, you're welcome to do that. And because it's going to be hard for me to repeat, I will be happy to give the microphone. I think someone here was first. I think I saw.
Well, I actually was going to make another comment. I don't have a story.
Oh, you don't have a story.
So pass it to someone.
Okay. Yeah. We got to get to stories. Here you go.
I don't need that thing.
Hold it close, please.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, you do. I don't want to repeat it.
So my brother and I, we have definitely different views in the last especially 4 years. One of our conversations is about religion. He is very born again. I'm agnostic.
There's a little difference there.
Yeah, and so I told him, I said, well, you're hamstrung because of your beliefs on the teachings of what you listen to, and I'm open to all of those beliefs. And so we have quite interesting, and it usually ends up, and he won't talk to me for about 2 weeks.
So he won't talk to you after these conversations. So these conversations generally don't go well?
Okay, all 4 of your things on the list, that's me. I'm overbearing, I interrupt, I like to keep control, and so does he.
Oh, so you both are struggling with the ingredients here.
Yes.
All right, thank you for confessing to Father David. One more, before we move on from the story, is there anything you think that either one of you could do? And obviously he's not here, but is there something that you could do to improve the conversation?
Well, of course, we could both be more civil.
Okay, very good. I can't add to that.
Each other's feelings.
All right, thank you for sharing. We got a story right here.
I wasn't wanting to share a story, but I wanted to ask you about the use of the word beliefs over and over again in your conversation.
Oh, she has a...
Because it seems to me that beliefs are like tissue paper. They're just whatever we fantasize, really. And so that languaging kind of...
She's asking for clarification about a semantics truth claim, I guess. That's a great question. And she's asking about my use of the word beliefs. What do I mean? For her, the word beliefs just seems like you're just kind of imagining something. And I'm glad you've said this, because it's something that I clarify in other contexts, and I should do it at the beginning here. In the humanities, in philosophy, we use the word beliefs differently than the scientists do. When the scientist hears the word belief, it sounds like something you consider true and you have no evidence and you can't prove it. That is not what we mean at all in philosophy. A belief is anything to which you give intellectual assent. Anything that you consider true is a belief. So for us, we have religious beliefs, we have political beliefs, we have scientific beliefs. If you consider it truth, then it's a belief, and that's all. Well, some of my beliefs are absolutely grounded in evidence, and some are not. So the basis or the truth of the belief is a different question. But the definition, I think I'm losing my microphone here. Yeah, the battery's dying. Yeah, thank you for that. Can I get one more? Who's got a really good story? Someone who hasn't talked yet. I think she was waving me really hard right here. And when you wave your hand that hard, you deserve the mic. Yeah, hold it close.
I learned, and this is after a long time of marriage, but just in the last few years, that my husband is very conservative and a Trump supporter, and I'm very liberal. And that's only become clear in the last few years. And we've had to learn to live with that. Where I really struggle is labeling, where he will say something really negative about Democrats, that are gonna ruin America, turn it into socialism. And I say to him, you're talking about me, I'm a Democrat. So I really recognize that, in me when you brought that up, and I don't want to do that anymore. We really can't get anywhere with our conversation, and I identify with the woman that said, we need to bring our hearts, because deep down, we love each other. And I think it's important sometimes, and maybe more often, to simply recognize that you're not going to change somebody else's beliefs, and maybe your conversation is about learning something yourself. You're not going to change that other person. So that's where I am with my husband.
Thank you. So we lost our mic again. She was basically saying that in her marriage, she and her husband are deeply divided politically. She wants more heart as well, and to recognize the fact that sometimes the goal shouldn't be necessarily to change anybody's mind. Sometimes the goal should be understanding the other, and that's a great way to bring our session to an end. So thank you for coming today. I appreciate it.